Okay, so imagine you're standing in the middle of the desert in Egypt, looking up at this absolutely massive stone structure in front of you. It's taller than a 40-story building. It's been sitting there for over 4,000 years. And the crazy part? We still don't fully understand how it was built. No machines, no computers, no cranes. Just people, stone, and a whole lot of patience. That's the Great Pyramid of Giza. And honestly, the more you learn about it, the more your brain just goes, wait, how? Let's start from the beginning. A long, long time ago, around 2600 BC, which is so far back, it's hard to even imagine ancient Egyptians started building these massive stone structures we now call pyramids. But they didn't just wake up one morning and build the Great Pyramid. No. It took them decades of trying, failing, learning, and sometimes almost completely messing up before they got it right. The very first pyramid was called the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. It didn't have smooth sides like the ones we picture today. Instead, it looked like a giant staircase going up into the sky, 6 big steps, one on top of the other. It was about 200 feet tall, and at the time, it was probably the most impressive thing any human being had ever seen. People must have just stood there with their mouths open. This was the world's first skyscraper, basically. Then a pharaoh named Snefru came along and said, okay, step pyramids are cool, but I want smooth sides. And this decision, this one design choice, almost ended in complete disaster. His architects built the pyramid at a steep angle, 55 degrees. Things looked great at first. Then, halfway through construction, cracks started appearing in the walls inside. Turns out they had built the whole thing on soft clay. The weight of the pyramid was slowly sinking into the ground. The whole structure was at risk of collapsing. So what did the engineers do? They panicked a little, probably. Then they came up with a solution. They changed the angle midway through construction from 55 degrees down to 43 degrees. The result is this weird-looking pyramid that starts steep and then suddenly gets more gradual near the top. Today we call it the bent pyramid. It looks a bit like the pyramid changed its mind halfway up. But here's the thing, it's still standing 4,500 years later, so maybe they did something right. After that little disaster, Snefru's architects played it safe with the next one. They built the Red Pyramid at a much shallower angle. It worked perfectly. It's the oldest true smooth-sided pyramid in Egypt, and it's still there today. And then came Khufu Snefru's son, who said, you know what? Let's just go bigger than anything anyone has ever done in the history of humanity. And so they built the Great Pyramid of Giza. The numbers are just insane. The Great Pyramid is 480 feet tall. It's made of 2.3 million stone blocks. Some of those blocks weigh 50 tons. The whole structure weighs around 6 million tons. That's the same as 16 Empire State Buildings stacked together. For nearly 4,000 years, it was the tallest building on Earth. Nothing came close. Not in Greece, not in Rome, not anywhere. And it was built by people who didn't even have the wheel yet. Let that sink in for a second. Now, one of the biggest questions has always been, how did they actually build it? And this is where things get really interesting. First, they had to pick the right location. The ground needed to be solid enough to support millions of tons of stone, so they chose bedrock. Then they had to lay out the base of the pyramid and align it perfectly with north, south, east, and west. Today, we'd use laser equipment and digital compasses. The Egyptians used the stars. They built a semicircular wall, watched where specific stars rose and set in the night sky, and found the exact midpoint. Using just this method, they aligned the Great Pyramid with true north to within less than a 20th of a degree. That's more accurate than a lot of modern buildings. Engineers today look at that and just shake their heads. Then they needed to make sure the base was perfectly flat and level. Their solution? Water. They carved channels along the edges of the base and filled them with water. Water always finds its own level, so by following the water line, they could make the entire base perfectly horizontal. Simple, brilliant, and it worked. Now came the real challenge, the stone. Most of the pyramid is made from limestone, which is relatively soft as far as rocks go. The Egyptians cut it using copper chisels. Now, you might be thinking, copper? That's a soft metal. How do you cut rock with copper? And normally, you'd be right. But here's a lucky accident of chemistry. The copper used by the Egyptians wasn't pure. It had small traces of arsenic mixed in. This made it significantly tougher than pure copper. The Egyptians had no idea why their tools worked as well as they did, but that little impurity in the metal made all the difference. For the harder stone granite, which was used for the most important interior chambers, copper chisels were useless. Granite is one of the hardest natural materials on Earth. So the Egyptians used copper saws. And not just any saws with no teeth. That sounds completely ridiculous. But here's how it worked. They poured wet sand under the blade. The sand contains quartz crystals, which are extremely hard. As the toothless copper saw moved back and forth, those quartz crystals acted as the cutting edge, slowly grinding through the granite. It was painfully slow, only about 2 cubic inches per hour, but it worked. Cutting out the stone coffin inside the Great Pyramid alone probably took about 4 months using this method. Once they had the stone, they had to move it. Huge blocks weighing several tons had to travel across the Nile and up to the building site. Most experts believe they used wooden sledges pulled along wet sand or mud. Adding water to the sand actually reduces friction significantly, making it easier to slide heavy objects. The granite blocks came from Aswan, 600 miles away, and were floated down the Nile on large wooden boats. Getting the blocks up the pyramid itself is still one of the great unsolved questions. Almost everyone agrees that ramps of some kind were used, but nobody knows exactly what kind. Did the ramp go straight up one face? Did it zigzag? Did it spiral around the whole pyramid? The ramps were taken apart after construction, so there's very little evidence left. It's one of those puzzles that keeps archaeologists up at night. Once the blocks were in place, they had to be fitted together. Here's a fun detail. Most of the interior blocks were actually quite rough and were just held together with rubble and gypsum mortar, a bit like ancient concrete. But any stone that would be visible from the outside, that was cut with incredible precision. The gaps between those stones are so small that you literally cannot slide a credit card between them. The Egyptians achieved this using only wooden rods, string, and a little red paint to mark the high spots that needed to be shaved down. It's the kind of work that would impress a modern stonemason using power tools. The finished pyramid was then covered in a smooth outer casing of brilliant white polished limestone. When the sun hit it, the whole structure would have blazed like a mirror. People from miles around would have seen this blinding white structure rising from the desert sand. Can you imagine seeing that for the first time? You'd probably think it was something supernatural. So who actually built all of this? For a very long time, The popular story was that it was slaves. Thousands and thousands of people forced to work under terrible conditions. Movies love this version, but it's wrong. Completely wrong, as it turns out. Archaeologists have found the tombs of the actual pyramid builders near Giza, and these are not the graves of slaves. They're proper tombs, carefully prepared, with food and objects left inside for the afterlife, the same traditions given to respected members of society. As one famous archaeologist put it, if these people were slaves, they would never have been buried in the shadow of the pyramid like this. Slaves don't get honored burials. Forensic analysis of the workers' bones tells us even more. They were Egyptian, not foreign. Their skeletons show signs of hard physical work, yes, but also of medical care. Broken bones had been reset properly. One skull even shows evidence of basic brain surgery. You do not perform brain surgery on people you don't care about. So who were they? The best current evidence suggests a core group of skilled craftsmen who lived and worked at the pyramid site full time. They were fed well. Archaeologists found evidence that they regularly ate beef, which in ancient Egypt was a sign of relatively good status. These craftsmen were supported by rotating crews of workers who came from villages across Egypt a few months at a time, almost like a national service. They came to build, they were housed and fed, and then they went home. A modern estimate puts the workforce at around 25,000 people at peak construction. And the whole project, this 480-foot monument of precisely fitted stone, was completed in about 23 years. To stay on schedule, workers had to place a new stone block every 2 minutes, every single day, for over 2 decades. Now, why? Why did an entire nation pour this much energy and manpower into building giant stone tombs in the desert? The short answer is, they believed it was literally the most important thing they could do. To ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was a god. And when a god king died, it wasn't just a sad event, it was a cosmic emergency. The whole balance of the universe was in danger. Drought, famine, chaos, all of these could result if the dead pharaoh didn't successfully make his journey to the afterlife and continue protecting Egypt from the stars above. The pyramid was the machine that made this journey possible. Deep inside some pyramids, archaeologists have found walls covered in hieroglyphs, texts full of spells, prayers, and instructions to help the pharaoh navigate the afterlife. These pyramid texts are among the oldest religious writings ever discovered anywhere in the world. They describe a world where the pharaoh, after death, would rise into the sky and become an eternal star. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating theories about the pyramids. An astronomer named Robert Bauval was looking at an aerial photograph of the 3 pyramids at Giza one day when he noticed something strange. The 3 pyramids aren't in a straight line. 2 large ones line up neatly, and then the third, smaller one is offset slightly to the side. He looked at this pattern and thought, I've seen this somewhere before. And then it hit him. Orion's Belt, the famous constellation of 3 stars that ancient Egyptians associated with Osiris, the god of death and resurrection. 2 bright stars, one slightly dimmer star, offset to the side. The match is striking. Even more interesting, the Great Pyramid has 4 narrow shafts built into it, only about 8 inches wide, running through hundreds of feet of solid stone all the way from the interior chambers toward the outside. For a long time, people assumed they were air vents, but their angles suggest they were pointed at specific stars, stars that held deep religious significance to the Egyptians, including Sirius and the stars of Orion's belt. The shafts may have been built to help the pharaoh's spirit travel up and out toward those stars. A literal stairway to heaven, built from stone. In 1993, a small robot was sent up one of these shafts to see where it led. After about 200 feet, it stopped. In front of it was a small limestone door with 2 copper handles. In 2002, a more advanced robot drilled a tiny hole through that door and pushed a camera through. What it found on the other side was another door. Nobody has seen what's behind that second door. Nobody has been in that part of the pyramid for 4,500 years. Some researchers believe there are still undiscovered chambers inside the Great Pyramid. Ancient surveys using technology that measures variations in density have suggested the presence of spaces not yet explored. The burial chamber of Khufu, the pharaoh who commissioned the whole thing, has never been found. His mummy has never been found. The famous burial chamber that tourists visit today might not even be the real one. We built this enormous thing. We've had thousands of years to study it. We've sent robots into its walls, and it's still keeping secrets. The pyramids have now been standing for more than 4,000 years. They've survived earthquakes, wars, tomb robbers, tourists, and the relentless passage of time. The polished white casing stones are mostly gone, taken over the centuries to build mosques and castles in Cairo. The pyramid has lost about 30 feet from its original height, but the structure itself, still there, still solid. Scientists have calculated that even at the rate it's slowly eroding, it could take another 65,000 years before it disappears from the skyline. There's an old Arab proverb that goes, "Man fears time, yet time fears the pyramids." That pretty much says it all. The pyramids are not just old buildings. They are proof of what human beings can do when they are organized, motivated, and determined. No computers, no power tools, no modern cranes. Just an incredibly well-fed workforce, some copper chisels, a lot of sand, and a belief that what they were doing mattered more than anything else in the universe. And 4,000 years later, we're still talking about them, still studying them, still discovering new things inside them, still standing in the desert, looking up and thinking, wait, how? Maybe that's the real secret of the pyramids. Not what's inside them, but what they do to us when we look at them. They make us feel small and amazed at the same time. They remind us that people who lived thousands of years before us, without any of the technology we take for granted, were just as clever, just as creative, and just as capable of doing something extraordinary. And they left us these 4,000-year-old stone reminders just to prove it.